Hello, this is Albatross, and this is my first video. Today I'll be talking about Black Lives Matter, class, and identity politics. You have been warned. 1. Black Lives Matter. When George Floyd was choked to death by police officers, many blamed racism. A white cop kills a black man. Not a very uncommon narrative. This caused a nationwide protest against police brutality. Black Lives Matter was at the center of these protests. Now, most would agree what happened was clearly not acceptable, and things have to change. One must wonder, what must change to solve police brutality? There are several popular ideas that are supposedly at fault for police brutality, and solving these problems will fix police brutality. One is the current US government. The second is slashing police budgets. The third is white supremacy. I was talking with a colleague of mine several days ago, and she, being a black woman, showed clear hatred and disapproval of the current US government. I asked her in turn, who is your favorite president and why? To no surprise, she said Barack Obama. Her first reason being he's black, being able to empathize with black people or whatever. This argument falls apart when you realize in 2015, during Obama's presidency, was the year with the highest number of black men killed by the police. Trump did not just create this police brutality. Republicans aren't at fault for systematic police brutality that was created before they even got elected. Now, is it not weird that police brutality is happening in mostly Democratic states? If voting Democrat in the upcoming election will solve police brutality, why are they happening in Democratic states right now? Is it almost as if the Republicans aren't the party of evil and that the Democrats aren't the party of good? Cutting police budgets is something Black Lives Matter supporters want, and many governors have agreed to do such, although politicians keeping promises are like making your dog go vegan. Their animalistic instincts will override them. Police do get paid a generous amount. For example, a NYPD officer will make $45,000 when they start, and a guaranteed $85,000 raise when they serve for 5 years, great vacation days, and a pension for the rest of their lives. What is this, Bernie's communism? Cops are out here living the socialist dream, aren't they? This isn't some random guess, by the way. It comes out on their website. According to The Atlantic's interview with sociologist Alex Vitale, says the NYPD's budget will be cut by a whole 0.39%. This is at the same time they want to cut education by $600 million. The NYPD loses a measly $23 million. It seems cutting the budget won't do anything. Vitale also states that reform won't do anything either. I quote, Minneapolis was really kind of a shining star. They adopted this whole set of recommendations that were included in President Obama's task force on 21st century policing. Things like implicit bias training that assumes that the problems of race and policing in the United States are about unconscious, unintentional, individual, discretionary decision-making by officers. I mean, this is just ludicrous. First of all, we have a problem of explicit racism in American policing. And also, the decision to turn the problems of poor communities of color over to the police to manage inherently reproduces racially disparate outcomes and reproduces racial inequality in the United States. Racism is baked into the institutional mission set by our political leaders, including President Obama. So this reform cannot give us any relief. Neither can having police community encounter sessions which they did in Minneapolis, or instituting accountability mechanisms that were largely procedural in nature. Body cameras, new use of force policies, de-escalation training. There's absolutely no empirical evidence that this makes any more than a superficial difference in the way policing is conducted. The last is white supremacy. As Vital said, there is supposedly an implicit bias among police officers, them being racist against black people. I don't want to deny the fact that there certainly is some form of institutional racism in the police force. Statistics show that black people are arrested at a much higher rate than any other race, and are also the most to be proven innocent. At face value, this seems that black people are unfairly harassed because of their skin color. Well, this is somewhat true. There's a much larger factor at play here: class. Police don't go patrol middle-class suburbia or the so-called good part of town, but slums and inner-city neighborhoods where there tends to be high crime rates. These towns are also full of minorities. Do you see a repetition here? Racial minorities are often oppressed due to their class, not just their skin color. Race does play a factor, but ultimately, class is what oppresses these people. And to be fair, most welfare recipients and inmates are white, poor, and white. Incredible, considering white privilege was supposed to clear all that. 2. Class matters. Despite what the liberal media, mind you, liberal means everyone that supports the current status quo system, tells you to believe, America's greatest problem right now is not race or any form of identity for that matter, but rather the collective identity of the class. By subdividing us into racial, sexual, and gender groups, the liberal media has divided and conquered the working class of America into believing the other group is their enemy. This tactic can be traced back as far as Weimar Germany. There is a saying called anti-Semitism is socialism of the fools. What does this mean? Well, it is a simple analysis of race and identity politics. If you listened to a speech Hitler made without any context, there could be a very good chance there was a lot of left-wing rhetoric sprinkled in there. However, ultimately it degenerates into "it's the Jews' fault" rhetoric. This happens still to this day. The Jewish capitalists controlling the media and the industry. Well, it is true, there are certainly Jewish capitalists that probably do control the media and the industry. The majority of Jewish people are working class, just as we are. The actual ones controlling the media and the industry are capitalists, not a race or identity, but their collective class. Do you see a difference here? Identity politics of liberalism constantly focuses on a certain identity of an individual that they may identify as, rather than the class that is actually responsible for most problems in society. This is why we cannot fall in trap to identity politics. I quote Ruth Fischer, a German communist who betrayed her comrades and ratted them out to the House Un-American Activities Committee, or HUAC. Whoever cries out against Jewish capital is already a fighter for his class, even though he may not know it. You are against the stock market jobbers. Fine. Trample the Jewish capitalists down. Hang them from the lampposts. But how do you feel about the big capitalists, the Steins, Klockner? Only in alliance with Russia, gentlemen of the folkish side, can the German people expel French capitalism from the Ruhr region. This is the main reason why I cannot stand certain Black Lives protesters and their corporate donors. They want the Black Lives Matter protesters to think white supremacy is their problem. This form of racial witch hunting has been done before against Jews. While I do not think Black Lives Matter protesters are actively trying to hunt down whites, it causes division among the class, consequently making the white centrists think their place in society is at danger of being replaced. The more the working class clashes onto one another, the better it is for the capitalists, as they can continue reaping the profits from their kleptocratic ways while we bash one another for our collective woes. The words of Bible and Bakunin, their passive-aggressive stance against Jews, still stand true today. How many BuzzFeed articles, Instagram posts, Reddit threads have you been watching talking about white capitalism, decolonization, and white privilege? There are thousands of these. It is the liberal attack against the white proletariat and an attempt to divide the working class. Antagonizing white people and attempting to make them apologize for crimes they did not commit is nothing more than eating the left-wing cause from the inside out. It is not the inherent hatred and supremacist thought in white men, but rather his demonization and antagonization of an identity he did not choose to be birthed of is what causes so many white men to turn to fascism and the alt-right. The left needs to become an alternative to the right, not a critic of the right, and actually think of ways to replace capitalism, not hunt down people to fault the situation on. Who do you think will benefit the most out of these protests? Black Lives Matter, without any actual achievable long-term goals? No. The benefits will go to the corporations that can pledge money to organizations, get tax cuts, and make the liberal media worship them. And it is already happening now. Removing TV shows episodes that are racist or changing the logo of a brand is not progress. I don't care if your model is black, transgender, and lesbian. It is ultimately the same company that exploits its workers in second and third world sweatshops and is actively murdering the planet. There's another layer of problem to this Black Lives Matter trend. The social media platform it thrives upon is emitted internationally. Countries like Finland, where there are only 2% non-Europeans in its countries, have protesters shouting in English about racism. And left-wing parties in Europe, such as Labour in the United Kingdom, Die Linke in Germany, have all given support to the Black Lives Matter cause. What does this do? Distract left-wingers from problems in their countries, such as systematic oppression of the working class, into a worship of Americanism. Instead of class consciousness, the media constantly tells us white people are the problem, and the patriarchy oppresses women to the left-wing folks, and Jews are manipulating your politics, the transgender agenda, to the right-wing folks. Divided, the population is easy to subjugate because you'll voluntarily fight against your own class, disillusioned by some fake identity they put upon you. No matter how much you hate those Antifa anarchists or that boomer that flies a Confederate flag, you have so much more in common with one another than a rich capitalist or a overpaid MSNBC or Fox News anchor telling you who to hate next. I'm not denying racism, sexism, or transphobia. These are real issues we must overcome as a society. However, so-called leftists posting blacked out screens as supposed hashtag activism is not helping anyone but the capitalist class. We must talk about the class structure that oppresses every single worker in America equally. Yes, some people have it worse than others, but ultimately we are united in our collective identity of class, the working class of America and the world. 3. Identity politics. I remember reading a piece by Stanley Fish on when identity politics is rational. A quick one-line summary of this would be, since this political candidate is in my identity group, they will be able to solve problems that I face because they are able to relate to me. This, at face value, makes sense, and probably why a lot of black voters voted Barack Obama as President of the United States, thinking he would be able to empathize with the struggles black people face. This makes sense. However, does it? What makes a black man empathize with your struggles as a black worker? Let's make a radical example. What does Kanye West, a billionaire, have in common with a working class person who happens to be black? Except the color of your skin, there's no similarity at all. Now, what does a white working class person have in common with a black working class person? Class. You have to understand that your class is ultimately a much more rational and stronger tie than the color of your skin. This really infuriates me when I see people on social media unironically preach for the support of black capitalists. Those capitalists are just as exploitive and evil as their white counterparts. Their skin color gives them zero redeeming qualities. While I do not think Tucker Carlson is a very good source for information, he does make a good point. I quote, "Every minute you're angry about race, you are not thinking about class, which is the real divide in this country." Ironic, considering that he makes millions each year, but he makes a good point nevertheless. Have you ever wondered why, despite consistently doubling the number of black people shot by the police, white people being shot always gets less coverage? Have you seen Black Lives Matter protesters stop protests due to white people being shot by the police? Sure, they say they protest police violence, but in reality it is really just a knee-jerk reaction to the media hype over George Floyd. If Black Lives Matter wanted actual, real change, and the corporations, media celebrities that support such causes did as well, why now? Why only when the murder of a black man by a cop becomes trendy? It is because they don't want actual change. They just want to keep the status quo by pandering to whomever will get them the most amount of money and good publicity. If this wasn't sinister enough, there's a whole nother level to this: to divide the working class. These people will write ridiculous trash called journalism, such as "I'm not small, white people are too tall," or other hateful rhetoric that is passed around as acceptable, causing further marginalization in the working class of America. Another narrative is this idea that there's this divide between black cop and white cop in the police force. Well, according to Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences of the United States of America, I know that's a bloody long name, isn't it? Each group of race was more likely to shoot their own race. Yes, black officers have a higher chance of shooting black civilians. And this goes for Latino, white, Asian as well. This fact completely dismantles the claim that white cops are bad and somehow black cops should not be considered just as bad as their white counterparts. While I do agree police brutality and the act of policing is a wing of the state to commit state-funded terrorism against its citizens, it is most definitely not caused by the white people. Identity politics is the ultimate neoliberal weapon that forces the working class into a frenzy to fight their own kind. Conclusion. Now that I have addressed all the points Black Lives Matter and its supporters make on fixing policing, I'll give you an actual way to solve police brutality in America. To be blunt, there isn't. The very basis of policing is not a concept disintegrated with the state, but rather an organ of the state. How are you going to sue the very system that allows such legal actions to proceed from the first place? How are you going to police the ones whom police? There is no way for slow, polite reforms. Trying to fix policing is as futile as trying to fix those 70s American compacts. It was broken from the start. Although I have various opinions about this fact, I am not trying to sway your thoughts. I'm not an ideologue, just a seabed that talks about politics and current events. I'll conclude my first video here. This is my first video, so please don't be too harsh about the low audio and video quality. I'm recording this on my laptop without an actual microphone and editing the footage with a laptop. First time trying to make a video actually. So yeah, don't be too harsh on the bad video quality. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you on the next one.